Yeah, and have
All
some fun
right.
with this as well. Cool.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Nola Simon. I'm the host of the Hybrid Remote Center of Excellence. And joining me today is Nicholas Badminton. He is a chief futurist. You've been working in futures for what, 30 odd years?
Yeah, I've been in the professional context since 1996, and really there's been a thread of futures through all of that. At the beginning, it was so to go back a little bit further. 1993, did a degree in applied psychology computing, focused on artificial intelligence, linguistics, organizational change. It's very funny that those three things were what I looked at, considering where we are today with the craziness of Chat GPT and what people are talking about. But basically spent my entire career working in data and building out software solutions, running large teams. And there was always a focus, but that was more like five to 10 years. And in the last sort of 10 years, there's been a direct focus on futures work. So, the intersection of humanity, technology, social change, culture, and a whole number of different things. So that's where I stand today. But yeah, there's always been a thread of futures all the way from very early childhood, actually, when I started to read books about futures thinking and speculations on technology.
Yeah, cool. Now you, on this podcast, you own the very nice distinction, and I'm going to hold it up so people can see, Facing Our Futures. Nick is the first person to actually send me a copy of his book in advance so I could read it.
There you go. There you go.
I'd like doing a video version of this podcast so we can get his money's worth. And I wanted to say thank you. It was a very interesting book. I'm fascinated with your approach to storytelling because to me, a lot of this is about challenging worldviews and mindset, and the way that we can do that a lot is storytelling. So could you speak to that?
It's interesting. A lot of leaders, executives, venture capitalists, government folks like to talk about the future, but not many of them actually want to invest in creating something that actually provides a longevity to any particular way of working or mindset or whatever. So I bring new thinking to the situation where it's okay, we've got to wake up. There's a poverty of imagination in the world. So we've been put in boxes, and I think at 270, 300 years, the Industrial Revolution has beaten that curiosity, that imagination out of the majority of people. We end up getting to work and we're told what to do, or even if we're top of the tree and we're being creative and strategic, it's within boundaries and within boxes. And what we do in futures work is the first thing we do is work out where those boundaries are, and we step over them very firmly and then go exploring into a lot of different areas. And a big part of that is understanding that we have to ignite imagination. We have to think differently. We have to really admire and embrace a lot of different worldviews. The fact is, there is no singular future. There's multitude of futures. That's an important part of the mindset. I talk about shifting mindsets from what is to what if. So what if is an invitation to be curious. Back in the day, I used to do keynotes and it was like this trend, that trend, this tech and whatever. Welcome to the future. And this is going to change your life. It's not that simple. And also that's a very provocative way of delivering that information. But what we have to do is become highly introspective when we start this journey. And when I work with clients, it's okay, brass tacks is this. And I talk about this a little bit in the book. And so we got to question our own history. I always say that nostalgia is the enemy of good futures thinking. The good old days, let's kill that idea immediately.
2019 was not coming back.
And it's like, oh, do you remember? Or granddaddy and daddy built this business. And I've got some examples of where I've had conversations around this. Practice curiosity and be courageous. And being courageous and having bravery with these conversations is really important because we've got to speak truth to power even within our own organizations. I love people like Greta Thunberg getting on stage and saying blah blah blah. No one's saying anything. No one's saying anything that's going to be acted upon. This is all not really happening. The amount of people that hate Greta Thunberg that I've met because like she's irritating to them, and good. We are irritants. Like futurism is activism. That's really important. What we have to do as well is we have to really get comfortable with ambiguity and multiple perspectives because futures is plural. there can be lots of different outcomes of lots of different situations. This is tricky to work through with clients, but ultimately, when you do exercises in a room of 30, 40 people, you end up with dozens and dozens of potential outcomes, potential sort of journeys forward for the company. And they're like, what do we do with this? It's like you explore them, you embrace them, you understand that lots of people are different. I used to work in advertising, and I remember I worked for a very large Canadian telecommunications company. I was a strategist on the agency side working for them. And they said, our ideal customer is the wife and the husband and the daughter and the son. It was homogenous. It was boring. It was uninteresting. And it was like, yeah, we're selling cable TV to these people. And it's like, Christ, like we're so far away from a reality that this is like the death of imagination and the death of good thinking anyway. And this brings me on to the next point. Once you've actually framed the idea of there being multiple perspectives and multiple futures, we actually have to be creative, and we have to be what I say is wildly creative. We have to entertain as many ideas as possible, and we don't discount anything, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. But in doing so, we also need to focus on the non-zero sum game. There don't have to be winners and losers. And this is hard for a lot of companies to understand. The best companies in the world don't try and own you exclusively. They like you to be part of a wider ecosystem. They respect that in your life. And some of the big tech companies understand that. Whilst you might have someone like Amazon that wants you to only shop at Amazon, they know that the overall ecosystem of retail and choice and you being a business person as well as an individual shopper is incredibly important for that rich tapestry. And it's the same for big tech companies, social media companies, and whatever, even though they all try and ensnare you in their terms and conditions as well. So that's some of the ways to help shift mindsets. But again, I talk about shifting from what is to what if at a very simple level, invitation to be curious and invitation to entertain different possibilities as we look forward.
And before this podcast started, you posted something on LinkedIn. That's what I was checking earlier.
Yeah.
You do actually work in themes when you're looking at these stories and imagination and getting people to look at things differently. And those themes are geopolitics, permacrisis, simulation, utopia, and long-termism.
Sure. And so that was a particular keynote I did with a long time collaborator in Vancouver. I used to live in Vancouver. I now live in Toronto, and I travel the world doing what I do. Guy called Greg Spivak from Reboot Communications in Victoria, British Columbia. And that was at the Vancouver International Privacy Security Summit. So that was a specific keynote. But I do talk about the big, more like mega trends, all of these things. So the idea that geopolitics and climate change, water, energy, food, resiliency, waste, the circular economy, sustainability, these are all things that I really work with to start with. I don't like to leapfrog over them and say, oh, okay, here's some cool tech, let's plug that in, metaverse this and GPT-4 that and whatever. And I'm not saying that I've not done that in the past, but these days it's like there are bigger problems to deal with. The dynamics of the world are around where the shifting population, economic growth, where the dynamics of who are the power brokers and who are the heavyweights behind them trying to enforce things as well. So the keynotes that I do these days are a lot heavier than they were back in the day when it might be to a marketing and advertising conferences. Here's 10 technologies that are going to change your industry. Things right back down to grassroots. So thematically, I deal with a number of things. What I do, every single keynote I do is actually custom. So for that particular one, ideas around challenging the idea of utopia, challenging the idea of long-termism, which is the idea of painting a picture of a world that's fantastical, but we're never going to achieve. And just before we started the podcast, you said, oh, I saw you posted something about moonshots are bullshit. And it's interesting, that was from something that I did about 5 years ago when I realized that we're being fed all of this PR and marketing about the future. Right. Singular, whereas we need to shirk that off and get real about doing things. And unfortunately, we're seeing all of Silicon Valley regressing and literally getting rid of all of their capabilities around deep R&D, around proper futures thinking. Yeah, now's the time where there's a little bit of a battle for the hearts and minds. And now's the time for foresight practitioners to step up and work with people to say, hey, there's a real opportunity here, not only from a profit perspective and a growth perspective, but from a doing the right thing in the world and planning for 10, 20, 30, 50 plus years into our futures.
So that's a great question. So if you're a foresight practitioner, how do you find the clients that are actually going to have the openness, that mindset, and the willingness to really shift and adapt to that?
So this is what I do, and I can't say that this is the same for everyone. I run a very agile, small organization. I've got an associate group of futurists that I work with. So these are people that know everything from renewable energy to artificial intelligence to urban planning and architecture, a whole bunch of different things. And when a client comes to us, we can build a team and we can go in and work with them, or we can go and do keynotes individually and whatever. But what happens is, without fail in the past 10 years, absolutely all the clients come and find us, and they come to me directly to say, hey, we want to work with you. And that's a good qualification. I don't want to be part of RFPs. I don't want to compete. The only way that I compete against people like McKinsey and whoever is just by taking the work before it even comes to their desk. And that's really important. And bringing rigor. I come from a big consultancy background, come from an advertising background, come from a technology background. So I can slug it out with the best of them. But then there's the qualification, and it's, okay, do you want to explore? Do you want to change? Do you want to do something? And most recently, I was approached to work with a fossil fuel company providing natural gas. And I said, in 20, 30 years, your business is going to be obsolete in its current form. So why don't we do work together? Why don't we imagine a world where what you do today is non-existent in 30 years' time and what you're going to be like? And that was a big pitch. And the person I pitched it to in person was like, oh, yeah, we need to do some thinking, but clearly uncomfortable because they're still trying to protect their own business, even though the cracks are starting to show. And took it back to the CEO and senior executives, and they're like, no, we just want to focus on our current plans. And this is the problem, right? That company is likely not going to exist in 30 years' time, or in 15 years' time, they're going to scramble very hard to make up ground that they could have started establishing today. So it's interesting. You know, I've done work with governments. I've done work with large tech companies. I've done work with startups. Startups make changes really quick. At the beginning of COVID, I worked with a startup out of Halifax, and I was working with the CEO, and we went in, we did some exercises, actually prototyped a lot of the exercises and workshops and some of the ideas that I shared in my book with that on that particular engagement. And following that, they looked at their company, they looked at their vision and their brand, they looked at their roadmap, and they changed everything. And they were still fundamental about what they were delivering as a product and a service. It was a technology platform, but the way that it was done and the people on the board of advisors and the makeup of the team and content and promise and everything changed. And the business just is booming today. And it's really interesting. I worked with one of the world's largest tech companies, again, at the beginning of the pandemic. And yeah, they made policy decisions to protect people that were working alone at home remotely because of the signals that were very clear coming out in the world of the challenges that people have from a mental health perspective and the dynamics of remote work and how challenging that is and whatever. There's lots of things that can be done. Typically, we find that there's a champion within these organizations. And if you have that champion and they're senior enough, we can really start to inject new thoughts on how the world might be.
Cool. And that's actually what you did when the pandemic started. You lost all your speaking opportunities and you pivoted talking about the future of work and examining that, right?
Yeah, at the end of 2019, career was going incredibly well. 3,000 people in the Bellagio in Las Vegas, even in like January 2020, Des Moines, Iowa, 2,000 people from inland investment and farming. Anthony Scaramucci was there, like the famed press guy for Trump for 10 days. But he runs the SALT conference. I was invited to the SALT conference. Everything was gonna be like literally ignited, and it all disappeared. I bought a house. My partner was pregnant, and I moved in, and I lost all my work. But what do? Did we see it coming? I don't think I actually saw it coming as ferociously as it did. But what do? You sit down, you do good futures work, and you hunker down, you work out what you need to do, you transform your business, and then you do the work. And I did some really interesting work with the Bank of Canada, big tech companies, small tech companies, farming companies. 2021 was the biggest year I ever had. I didn't do any engagement outside of the studio that I built at home. So it's interesting. Now I'm back on the road. There's pretty much almost no virtual keynotes this year, but it's interesting. Now we're facing a recession. So we're having a different kind of work happening today as well. And it's really fascinating. There's no such thing as tumultuous times to make it a good condition on which to hire a futurist.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's what you mean by permacrisis, right? Because there's constantly something happening.
Yeah.
How do you constantly adapt? And that's actually part, like that's underlying the mental health issue, is just people are having to adapt to that constant ambiguity, constant change, and they just don't quite know where to go. And there's resistance.
Yeah. And we've ignored a lot of things. So I talk about black elephants in the book. The idea, everyone says black swans and they get it completely wrong. A black swan event is an unknown. It's going to be a tsunami. It's going to be a meteorite. It's going to be an earthquake, something like that. A black elephant is that thing that's always been stood in the room looking at you, and it's going to cause mayhem at some point when it gets up. The momentum behind it mix and the such. So there's always those things. And permacrises was something that's been promoted. I'm not sure if the World Economic Forum is progenitors of the term. I think it was maybe another sort of think tank organization. But permacrises, it's like all of these factors coming together to create a complex situation of chaos and potentially negative outcomes. You've got war, you've got economic shifts, you've got cyber crime, you've got mental health issues, you've got democracy being challenged with misinformation. Put it all in a mixing pot and you've got something very interesting, right? I feel that we've always been living in that world. It's just that today information travels so fast and we're more connected on these platforms than ever that it's been amplified to an nth degree.
There was something that you mentioned in the book, which I thought was really interesting. And a lot of it is to do with climate change and climate change boosters. And being in front of a large audience, you're very careful in the data that you present. You pull like US Army, so sources that are bulletproof, they're beyond credible, because that's the only way that you can really counteract that groupthink that happens in a large group. Could you tell us some stories about that?
Yeah, I sure can. So this was in 2019 again, and I did a large conference to a group of about 800 farmers in Alberta. And it's always a rather salty crowd. I actually really love chatting to people in the agriculture industry. I actually really love Albertans and what they do. It's a very tough crowd as well. And farmers are a very tough crowd because it's a really tough situation. We owe everything to farming at scale for the growth of the world, and we continue to owe so much to them. So big love and respect to them. But I did this keynote, and it was the last keynote where I was very much, here's the truth, you got to accept this. Welcome to the future, thanks very much. And a guy stood up at the end and was very negative about the keynote, saying that he couldn't believe half of the information in it and whatever. And I realized that you couldn't present information, throw it in and close the door to the conversation. You had to actually open it up. I actually ended up having a really good conversation with that chap, and we did. And about a week later, I was flying down to New Orleans for my birthday with my partner. And I bought a book at the airport by Rob Hopkins called From What Is to What If. And it changed everything, and it was an invitation to be imaginative and curious. And but just in my keynotes I have these trends with signals and scenarios, and then I say, yes, but what if the world changed? And people can't shut that down as an invitation. And people can come at you and say, yeah, but I don't believe this and I don't believe that. I don't think this is going to change and that's going to change. And then I mobilize sort of my secret weapon and I say, okay, but what if the world does change? And I say, if you can take every single statement that you just said, just put the word yet at the end of it and rethink through everything, replay everything, because everything's going to change. And it's not necessarily going to change the way that I necessarily think. I speculate on which direction based on the signals that I see. But for you to think that change isn't coming to change your industry, or regulations or whatever aren't coming to make things more tricky, then that's not going to serve you in the long term. I've got some battle scars, and from them I've learned some ways of framing I think are really important, because you don't want to lose anyone in the room if you're trying to do some work. And you know what? I've been in some incredibly hostile rooms, people that are climate change deniers, which is happening a lot less because it's becoming quite obvious that there's a challenge. People that just don't think that their industry is going to change. And I share stories about companies that made terrible decisions based on the same kind of logic.
Is that where fiction helps you? Because you actually write fiction as well, right?
Yeah, so the work of Futures is that of scanning for signals, the things that are indicating that the world are going to change, the identification of trends, which is multiple signals coming together, the trends that come out of that, and the effects from that, and looking at scenarios in a future time, maybe 2040, we see these people in these places and in these situations using these systems affected in these positive and negative ways. That's good scenario planning, and that's what I do, and I've written about in the book as well. You start to really explore how things are chopping and changing, but beyond that, we can make things come alive by writing fiction. And I write science fiction with my clients. Some people call it design fiction as well. And what you do is you take the dynamics that you've worked out in scenarios, but you put names and faces to the people in the stories and their interpersonal socioeconomic dynamics, the culture, the community, all of those things. And then you start to play out all of the systems in sort of normal run-of-the-mill daily, weekly, monthly activities, whether it's you're an organization or a family or a community and whatever. And what's important about stories is that they give you a feeling about what those futures could actually be. Now, once we can feel something and we can empathize with someone and we can imagine ourselves there, because when people tell stories to us and it's really good storytelling, we feel that we're there, we're really having an emotional reaction to it. Then you can believe that it's a possible situation and you can start taking things seriously, and you can start to identify the things that matter to you as an individual and you as an organization. And you can bring them back to strategic planning today and start the work of working out, okay, that might be 2040 and we're in 2023. What are the steps to get from here to there? And it's a really interesting situation. Stories engage more than dry presentations on scenarios and roadmaps, trajectories. The story makes it come alive, and I actually use it in my keynotes as well. I read stories, especially to very large audiences, because it just makes it all come alive.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't shy away from dystopian futures either. It's not like you're painting like a sunny picture of the future. You view it as important to have it, both elements of it, right?
Life isn't necessarily convenient or easy. I actually say that futures are terribly inconvenient. It's changing how we're going to be. We can make bad decisions today and we can make good decisions today. In the book, I talk about what a positive future is and what a dystopian future is. Positive is something that's built on accessibility and equality and equity and humanity before technology and all the good stuff. And that's my definition, and I'm sticking to it. The dystopian trajectory is what we live in today. Very few people own the majority of how the world operates and the money within it. We're colonized and put into boxes, and we work in certain ways, trapped in that industrial complex, and we continue to be by these solutions, live a happy life, just pay to play in this life, a lot more than giving someone access and being connected in a community in a more creative, artistic sense as well. So yeah, we have to take it into considerations. We're in constant hype cycles of politicians or leaders in government or leaders in business saying, hey, this is the future, this is what it's going to be, trust us, pay your subscription and we're going to deliver miracles. And you're stuck in a constant cycle that doesn't improve long-term outcomes. Fossil fuels is a great example of that happening for decades. Government and building new infrastructure and a whole bunch of different things is another example of that as well. But we need to put it in a very clear context of what the outcomes are, because there are always negative outcomes. That someone's always going to win, someone's always going to lose, even though we really want everyone to win. Once we can understand that those dynamics, we can start to disrupt the terrible thinking that happens. and start to build businesses in a much better way. Unfortunately, with market demand and shareholders and all these horrible things, we're seeing a world where there's contractions and layoffs and horrible situations because people just want to make more money. They don't actually care about the people that work for them or the progress of humanity. Right now in big tech, we're seeing them like give up the idea of creating a future that is actually open and equity driven to one that's just based on selling more ads to try and sell you more widgets, right?
Right. Now, you've actually taken steps into shifting how executives are actually educated. How do you envision that being important, and what's changing, and how are you taking steps to do that?
Yeah, so foresight and futures thinking, it's been around for a long time, but it's funny because there's not a lot of organizations that have really embraced it as a capability deep within their organizations. In Facing Our Futures, in the book, I talk about where it came from, how it's gotten to here. Some of the great thinkers that I use as reference points are actually in there. I've interviewed some of them as well. And what's really interesting is that there's studies that have come out that say that you're going to be more profitable and you're going to have much higher growth, like 200% growth, if you're vigilant, if you are future prepared, versus the companies that do not do that. In fact, those are the companies that are on the path to obsolescence, right? So now executives are taking it very seriously. I'm going to be working with the Schulich School of Business in Canada, York University, so #1 business school in Canada, with their exec ed program. So we're going to be doing that later this year, and working with people to really ignite futures thinking. Because all we need to do, even if you take 2 or 3 of the small methods that I talk about in my book, even just that shift of from what is to what if, to be curious, to ask questions every single day, to scan for signals, it's going to make your strategic planning better. It's going to give you a level of future preparedness that you didn't have before. It's going to have vigilance, and it's going to make your strategic planning, your risk scanning, and your overall brand organizational vision so much more potent and stronger than it has been, that it's kind of no-brainer these days to actually step up and do this.
That's excellent. And people want you to be real. Like, they want you to tell them the truth and be blunt. And that's what you bring to your keynotes and you present, right? Does it take a certain type of personality? Who responds to that and who doesn't?
I come from the skateboarding punk rock background. When I was a kid, playing in bands, DJing, I celebrate the counterculture. I celebrate people that think differently. I'm neurodivergent thinker myself. It's really tough to connect with a lot of very up entrepreneurs or executives within organizations. I've been told time and time again that they hire me to come in and shake it up. It's funny, I quip that I now get hired for the work that I used to get fired for doing. In an ad agency, you don't go in to shake it up. In a big four consultancy, actually, I worked for a company called Capgemini. We used to shake things up, but it was about mission critical systems and data and whatever. Advertising, oof. I actually got laid off from a very large advertising agency for speaking truth about current situations. And that didn't go down so well. I was put on ice and then I was fired 4 months later. And these are the same clients that are approaching me now. And that advertising agency is pretty much obsolete at this point. So go figure.
Yeah. There was one time you had posted something about a rock performance in the middle of a forest, and I had asked you about it. You sent me the clip, and I'm like, I don't quite get this. Could you explain that? How does art really subvert?
Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to take yourself out of the city and the workplace in your home to somewhere different, to have a different perspective. The one example I remember, this Nola, that I shared was there's a festival in British Columbia in Canada called Base Coast, and it's in Merritt. It used to be in Squamish. 4,000 people in the forest, and they build these amazing stages, and it's all eco-friendly, and it's all built on renewable energy these days, and people DJ and get together and have a lot of fun in many different ways and talk about important subjects and dance together. It's like that scene in The Matrix where they're all celebrating underground and in the cave. That kind of thing I think we need more of in life. And I've always explored the counterculture. I think that people have forgotten that counterculture can exist. We live in this horribly homogenized world of social media memes and TikTok dances, of articles and mindsets of which side are you on. and we've forgotten what it means to really get away and look these things off and say, okay, who am I and where do we go? And now we have an opportunity to do that. I've always wanted to do retreats with executives.
I was just going to go there. Like, this needs to be a retreat.
So I'm currently in the process of working out buying a property that will be used for retreats with executives. And I joke, and this is an idea I've had for a number of years. It's a retreat. I want to call it advance. And it's a retreat where you advance. So it's kind of, in what you're doing is you're retreating from the normal life into a completely different context where there's no electronics and there's no Wi-Fi. There's food and there's people and there's dynamics. There's big world problems that we can discuss, and we can come together and work this out. And we might do that with the help of good whiskey or maybe some strong psychedelics. I'm allowed to say that these days, right?
Yeah,
I'm allowed to say that these days.
Honestly, but to be quite honest, when I gave you the floor about attitude, I did expect you to take it a little bit further than there, because I'm like, okay, am I risking my clean rating? But
it's all good. Look, we live in a world where we have to really ignite imagination. We come back to that beginning piece, and I want to work with people that really want to take a chance. Chatham House rules, like, we don't share anything that's said. We get together. So yeah, that's a little project I've not really spoken a lot about to people. Maybe call that an exclusive for your podcast.
Ooh, I love exclusives. I did an exclusive the other day. I had Leslie M and her sister Erica. It's the first interview they've ever done before. So this is my week of firsts.
Well, there you go. It's all good. We're here to push the boundaries, right?
We are here to push the boundaries. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would really like to highlight?
You know what? We're at a point in time where we need to really be careful about being trapped by ideas of recession, ideas of contraction and protectionism of our own businesses. And we're at a point in time where we need to be open and creative and curious and connective, where we don't think that there's competition in the world, there's just collaboration. That's what I think is really important. And even in market-driven economics of the winners and losers, if you play this well, everyone's going to win. And obviously there's going to be some losers because they're the people that don't want to do futures work.
Yeah, exactly. So how tired are you about the ChatGPT conversations then?
I did work in artificial intelligence linguistics at university in the 90s. It was always going to be an area that is incredibly important. I've been following the large language model conversation for a number of years, and some of the warnings behind that. We've got this world where every single client I work with is asking me for my opinion on this. Last year it was about metaverse, and so that's a dead dog at this point. But like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence was always going to be disruptive. I like to think of the world as humans with technology, humans with the machine. So humans with artificial intelligence, because it's the same as us picking up a flint and turning it into an axe all of those hundreds of thousands of years ago, or the ability to create fire. It's just a tool. Now we've got these tools that are owned by companies or significant investment by large tech companies like Microsoft and OpenAI and whatever, and everyone's suddenly releasing their models to the world because everyone thinks that this is just going to be the most revolutionary thing. But what it does is it provides us with a new search engine, big deal, and it provides us with something that's highly homogenous and average. I always think that we're heading towards a place of low quality, lazy work. And I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of this if you don't use it properly. I tell clients this: if you have a question, or you want to write an article, or you want to be influenced by something that like ChatGPT or these other platforms, ask the questions, explore, look at them in stark relief, and realize that everything that they've just delivered you is everything that you need not be doing, and go off on your own journey and define your own vision and your own place. It's like it's a relief. It's a mirror. It's not the deliverable. I've used it to write articles on Futurist.com, whatever, as the idea of, look at this third grade, non-creative, non-exciting thinking. And we can go off and we can ignore what's already been said, because that's all it's doing. It's regurgitating what's already been said. It doesn't have imagination. It doesn't solve problems. Sure, it's complicated and complex, but only in a way of combining things in new ways. And sure, it's going to look like it's smart or maybe sentient, but truly it isn't. It's a very smart piece of kit. And I love it. I love this kind of development, but I don't like it.
The part is it gets people thinking about how things can be different, right?
Yeah, but most people are lazy. So not here to think different. Most people are here as marketers, like, oh yeah, I don't want to write 5 blog posts this week. And it's, you know what? I can spend half a day with some prompt engineering and I can write 5 outlines and reduce my work by 3/4. And it's good enough. I'm fed up of good enough. And that's why I left advertising and worlds like that, because in futures work, there's literally can't ask GPT-4 to write any kind of future scenario. It can't do it. It absolutely can't. It can write some science fiction, but it's not very good in any way, shape, or form. My opinion about GPT-4 is that it's the beginning of a journey, and it's another tool. And everyone's hyped about it because everyone is bored of what they're doing at work, and they're suddenly looking for something exciting. I actually think that in the next 6 to 12 months, there's going to be a little bit of a reckoning on these platforms and an understanding of what they're really doing in the world and what people can use them for to spread even more misinformation and embed it in society even deeper. Buyer beware. The intelligence communities are definitely looking at this very carefully and wondering how things are going to change. At the same time, criminal enterprises, organized crime, and foreign state actors are looking to basically seed in information that's going to create a poisoned well.
Yeah. It's shocking that some of the stuff that I've come across is just so shockingly wrong. And it's just, that's worrisome.
And so back in November, December, I used GPT-3 and used ChatGPT at that point to write a 1,500 word article on predictions across a number of different areas. And I specified it out. I was like, cool. And it was very average. It was okay. Some semblance of thought or semblance of reference. And I took the same prompt yesterday. I was like, what does this look like in GPT-4? Absolutely no different at all. So we're being sold something. And whilst all of these people are hyped up out there pumping out content saying, look at this, it can do this, it can build this website from this drawing, whatever. It's just generating more garbage. We got to be careful to use these things, but we're vulnerable and we're gullible. It's my mission to wake people up and say, hey, maybe bear in mind that this is not good work. And I fully respect that universities and schools are saying, no, we're not accepting work from these places because it's obvious that it's garbage that's being pumped out. I'd rather have a kid write something that was flawed and feels human than have a kid just pump something out, some content and play it back that is clearly this homogenous, dead-eyed sort of view of thinking or the satisfaction. GPT-4 talks about passing all of these exams. It's because exams are fundamentally flawed. Read this book, memorize this book, answer these questions. It's fundamentally flawed. It's a robotic process. Of course, the world isn't going to be a good place if people are like that. People that I know that are amazing at exams it's been generally proven that they're not actually good at creative problem solving because it's regurgitation.
Yeah, exactly. We see this with the collaborative articles on AI for LinkedIn. Have you come across that? Were you invited to participate with those?
No. I saw Reid Hoffman wrote an entire book on AI and I downloaded it and looked through and it's just another PR bump. Hey, look at this, it's cool. And I used it last year on Futurist.com, generated thousands and thousands of visits. Yeah. But only so I could hijack the conversation and talk about the implications of such things. Hey, this is another mini hype cycle. It's now receding into Office 365 and other applications, right? And just being useful. And I'm cool with that. Yes. And hopefully it will disappear from LinkedIn. And what's going to come next? Android robotics? I'm not sure. We'll see.
Hopefully it just doesn't sneak up on me like Roomba does.
Oh, yeah, Roomba. That's another deeper conversation right there.
I hate Roomba.
That's existential dread right there for many people.
Yeah, exactly. This has been a lovely conversation. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if I will hold it up again, this is my live and in person.
Right.
Make sure that you read this book. It's a great book.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Nola. It's been a pleasure.
All right.